All right, welcome everyone. This is our LinkedIn Live with Mike McQuillan. He is a world-class speaking coach. I'm Donna Knutson, and I am a writing coach. I help my authors put together their best manuscript that they can hand to a publisher. And a lot of times, what they are needing after they have this pathway to publishing is a way to talk about their book and a way to talk about their book to get people engaged and loving the content and they really want to buy it and they connect with it. And the way we create those connections is through storytelling. And that's why I'm so excited today to have Mike McQuillan with us, because storytelling is exactly the thing that he practices, and he can practice it with authors to help those authors um, to get that information to the people who are they're going to be the readers who are going to buy this book. So Mike it created Fit Presenter as a public speaking resource for professionals in all industries to stand out as a leader, regardless of their how long they've been there or their job title. And he turns your audience into ambassadors for your company, your product, and your brand using his signature fit system. Mike draws his experience from his professional background as a fitness trainer and instructor, his academic credentials as a guidance counselor, foreign language teacher, and his military experience in the Marine Corps as a combat correspondent. Now, he has an advanced certification as a certified world-class speaking coach to present his clients with the total package for public speaking. He's originally from Massapequa, New York, on Long Island. He's lived in New England, California, and Alaska. And right now, he lives in Lima, Peru. So I would like to welcome Mike McQuillan. And how are you doing today?
Well, Donna, that is a lot to live up to, but thank you for that intro, and I'm doing great. Great to see people still coming in. This is great. Hello, fellow authors, writers, speakers, and creators.
Absolutely. So the thing that I want you to maybe talk a little bit about is tell us a story. How is it that you can use telling a story to help people understand what your book is about?
Of course. See, and I always say that public speaking is nothing more than story time for grown-ups. And a lot of times in preparation for this, I did something I really hope the audience appreciates because I've endured some hard labor for this. And I watched a lot of book TV on C-SPAN via YouTube. And I'll tell you, you can get some of the most exciting books, most talented authors, just put an audience to sleep by summarizing the book. Maybe I'll give away the ending and then say, by the way, here it is, please buy it. But there's so many stories related to the book where you don't even have to open it up and talk about what's in the book to get people excited. There are a couple of things you can talk about. Number one is the genre of book that you wrote. For example, I always use the example of a cookbook. Let's just say you wrote a cookbook. I don't think you have anybody here who did that, but let's just say you wrote a cookbook. Instead of saying, here's my cookbook, here's my chicken recipe, here's my turkey meatball recipe, here's my chili recipe. Okay. Instead of that, tell a story about the first time you opened up a cookbook. You know something, Donna? It was nothing but microwave hot pockets and just whatever I can scrape together. And one day I pulled out my grandmother's cookbook and I made this chicken cacciatore recipe, and my life changed forever. And you can tell a story about that. You still haven't tapped into what's in your book. You've already hit that audience with your passion for this type of book. So even if you go dark and all of a sudden the feed drops and you're done speaking, they say, ooh, cookbooks. Let me go to the bookstore and see what they've got. And if you happen to be on the shelf, done deal. They're going to buy your cookbook. That is enough. That alone is enough to say, hey, you're passionate about this type of work and you put your passion into creating a book. What's in it is irrelevant. The fact that you even wrote a book is irrelevant. You've drummed up that audience's passion for the same thing that you have a passion for.
Now that's true. And tell me, because I guess that people sometimes are concerned, right? If I talk about my book, then people are going to know what's in my book. But what you're saying is talk about something adjacent to the book. Um, what about like their passion for why they started writing the book? Would that maybe make a good story?
That oftentimes goes toward the end of a presentation, why you did it. Now, some people say you start with why, it's kind of a popular, famous book. But if you start talking about yourself, and this is why I wrote the book, you still haven't brought the audience along for the ride. So your story as to why you decided, there had to be some kind of cathartic moment for you where you said, I have to get this down on paper. But with a good presentation where you follow my system, the AMY system, AMY, which is audience, material, then yourself. You tap into the audience first and their understanding of the subject matter you're writing about, the type of book you're writing, and you take them through some of the process of what it was like to write the book, what you had to do. All of that comes first. Just the number of people you had to interview. You can tell a story about the first time I actually picked up the phone and called somebody in Dubuque, Iowa, and had to ask these questions and how awkward it was and how natural it became. You just told some really good stories about what it was like to write the book. So you've got them engaged. Well, wow, this is really interesting. But you still haven't put yourself out there, your vulnerability out there. That's where you want to close with something had to happen in your life when you said, whoa, this needs to make its way to the page. And the page became a chapter, the chapter became the book, and here it is. You want to build that. So, wow, who is this Donna? Why are we? This is really exciting. She has so much knowledge. What drove her to do this? And then you hit him with what did it. And that's when they make that emotional connect at the end of your talk and say, okay, I'm going to get that book. Where do I sign up? Where do I fill out the form? And here we are.
Excellent, excellent, and we have more people coming in. So,
Excellent.
welcome to our talk. Mike is trying to tell us about how you can stand up and talk about your book, not give away everything that's in your book, but actually create connection between the people who are your potential readers and the material that you're writing about. And he's really kind of talking about how you can set that up. So it's really important for authors to make that shift from I just created a piece of art, all right, and I'm done. Well, you kind of are making a shift from being someone who created a piece of art to now you have something to sell. You really have become a business person. And when you say that word sell, I know people are like, oh my gosh, sell. But the thing is, you want people to buy your book and you want people to read your book. You could have the thing that will change their life. But if you don't make that clear to them, if you don't make them feel that passion for why that book is going to change their life, they're not going to know that it's for them. So that's the kind of thing, what other do you have any stories of authors who maybe were telling a terrible story and you helped turn them around?
Sure. I was hopeful. Well, Dan isn't here. Well, there is a Dan here, but not that Dan here, different Dan. I'll give you an example of somebody I worked with recently who wrote a memoir. It wasn't his whole life. He's doing this in stages, but he wanted to tell the story. It's his family story, some kind of a military history, and also his own ordeals. And it comes down to he went to West Point and then he got commissioned in the Air Force, which is kind of ironic, but that's what happened. So he was just telling, and then. Now I'm a veteran myself. The military people are the worst when it comes to, we've got exciting stories and boring details. And for some reason, we love boring details in the in the military. We just love it. The PX was closed early on Saturday, so we all used to go there. So I had to really shake it out of him. And we pulled out a couple of stories. And in the entire presentation, the book still hasn't been printed yet. But when you hear this presentation that he does, he said, you know something, Mike, this story didn't even make it to the book. But we ended up pulling a couple of stories. One, we told the story about when he was a teenager, the first time it was his turn to chop down the Christmas tree for the family. But they never chopped it off at the trunk, at the base. He had to climb a 60-foot Douglas fir, go 50 feet up, chop the top off it, let it come down, and then climb 50 feet back down and drag it back to the house. And the whole point of that story was to talk about family traditions and a rite of passage, a passing ritual for the family. Because that was his purpose for doing this, was preserving family legacy. Then he goes on to tell a story about being in West Point, probably the hardest day of training at West Point. Is that story in the book? Well, barely. But the reason why that story was so important was because of the letter that he wrote home after that. That was really impactful. So he's not telling, I'm so good, I'm so great. You should only tell you about the time I went to West Point and I graduated. It's not about that. It's about a story so impactful. He said, I need to write home about this story. And that planted the seed 50 years ago. Yeah, Dan, I put you under the bus, tell people how old you are. But over 50 years ago, that sparked him to say, I need to start chronicling what I do. I need to start writing about what I do. And the family history and the history of the military has got to be in what I write about. Then he tells some other stories. I'll get to that in a minute. But then we get to his story that sparked it on. He was at a military cemetery in, I want to say, Mississippi, somewhere in the South. And he found an archive of his great grandfather. And when he saw that, that is what sparked him to say, I'm writing this book. I'm writing this book to preserve history. I'm writing this book to honor my family, and I'm writing this book to tell my own story, to have it chronicled for my kids and my grandkids and going on. So all these stories that came out, none of them are in the book, but all of them convey his passion for preserving the family legacy, passion for telling stories about the military, and passion for going back into history to tell the story that people were not around. People didn't have YouTube to tell these stories. So he's going to be their channel for them.
So that's great. And what I love about that is that it's the same thing that's true that we learn from uh, talking with high-end business coaches, right? That people want to buy from people they know, they trust, they understand. So these stories are helping the authors get out their humanity. It's not stories about their perfection, it's stories about that maybe they're imperfections. And that's the thing that as humans, like we relate to those things. So when we hear other people have struggles that we have, we can see ourselves in them, and you're kind of bringing that really forward in those stories that you're telling. And I guess that would help you say to your author, the person who's listening, oh my gosh, that sounds like my friend, my cousin, my sister, myself. I got to read that. I got to see if that person would love that story because they connect with it.
Definitely. And like I said, it's not always the same stories that are in the book, because your message, and a lot of the people I work with are solopreneur people. I don't have the corporate world wants nothing to do with me, and the feeling is mutual. I work with a lot of solo business people. And I always say that your message has got to be bigger than your business. And when you're speaking, your message is bigger than your book. The book is a coincidence. And I could talk about that for myself. I'm working on some things, but we'll get to that. The point is, I started off by writing newspaper articles for a small base newspaper in the California desert. I could always talk about how writing these stories and trying to make something. I was not in a high-speed duty station. There weren't a lot of helicopters, bombs, and tanks. There was a lot of administrative things. It was my job to make mundane things exciting. And that translates over to, I'm working on something that you and I talked about this. I've got to get on a train, 30-day rail pass around the country. That's the dream, and then reflect on it. But not as a travel memoir, but each city has a lesson tied to it. And I'm not going to New York. Well, I'm going there, but it's not going to be part of the journey. New York, Vegas, LA, Hollywood, that's not going to be it. We're looking for towns that don't seem like there's much and make something of it. So I make your boring business exciting. I make your complicated business understandable, but you pull stories out, and those stories are bigger than what happens to be in your book.
Yeah, I think that's very true. The thing is, it doesn't have to be a story from your book. It can be a story from your book, was what I'm
Can be.
hearing.
Yeah, it can
Right?
be.
It could just be a story from your life, whatever is going to serve the audience that you're speaking to, probably.
Yes, exactly. The book is an extension of you. Every time you speak, you want to give that audience value. So they come away not saying, oh, that Donna really knows her stuff, but wow, you know something, you're a book coach. You can talk about, wow, I can write my book. I can write my memoir. I can write that novel that I've been working on. And understanding the process is not impossible. Understanding there is an audience, even if you're not selling 1 million copies, your story can change somebody's life. You can be somebody's hero. That message, you don't have to go into one of your books to convey that message.
So if an author's writing their book, finishing it up, thinking now I'm going to go out, I'm going to start, because you're going to do this while you're writing the book, right? You authors are not going to wait till you're done with the book to start talking about your book. You can start talking about your book while you are still writing the outline. So you're out there, you're talking about this book that is coming in the future, because then you have people who will be lined up to buy it when it comes out. That's the ideal situation.
Yes.
How would you tell someone who's a little nervous, let's say, to get started? I hope you guys are hearing that if you're talking about a story that's not even in the book, and that will still draw people to buy your book, you don't have to promise them something you deliver on in the book. Just tell them a story. You're talking about the ideas, right? The passion, like you're not promising them that this story is in the book. So you don't have to worry about talking about something and giving it away. You don't have to worry about what if it doesn't make it into the book, because that's not the point. So
Yes.
if somebody's getting ready to get started and they're gearing up, maybe they can let these kind of fears drop off. What's the best place for them to begin? Um, should they, if they should they do some research about the audience they're speaking to? Should they sit with themselves and kind of figure out a good story? How do you begin that I'm gonna talk about myself process?
Yeah, let me think about that. You can't always research every single person in your audience. You can kind of put your audience into categories. In fact, when I talk to people, I ask just for speech coaching, who's likely to be in your audience? And you look at potential collaborators, potential colleagues, potential a couple different avatars of who you're speaking to, because you're going to have more than one type of person in the audience. So what's important to them, and never assume you know, but you could always tap into some kind of common interest. And as I mentioned, the genre of book. So let's just say you wrote a romantic adventure novel. It's not my thing, but let's just say you wrote an adventure novel with unicorns and handsome princes and all that. And you can tap into people's appreciation for fantasy. We look at the movies, the more of a fantasy it is, the more we internalize it as reality, right? We care more about the journey of Luke Skywalker hopping from one planet to the next and it's fantasy. You can tap into that in your audience and say, hey, can you think of any stories growing up where the fantasy was so outrageous, yet the character's journey was so real to you in your life? Well, that's what I set out to capture when I wrote this book. You tap into your audience's understanding of the type of book you're writing and the subject matter you're writing about and their desire to tell their own story. You tap into that first. Always tap into your audience's interest and tap into their understanding and also tap into their misconceptions. Now I'm kind of plugging my workshop for next week. But those things, their understanding, their background knowledge and misconceptions they have of the type of book you're writing and of the subject matter you're talking about. Generate their interest. Make it part of the conversation. Because even though you and I are talking right now, everybody here is thinking, I don't know exactly what you're thinking, but there's probably a process of, yeah, I could put that into a book. Yeah, I can do that. It's always a conversation with them. Stimulate their understanding first. Then you can go into your passion for the subject matter. And then when you've earned it, you get to talk about yourself.
So I do love all of those. I'm gonna start to see if some people have some questions. Mike, if you could in the chat drop the information about your upcoming event that you have so we can share that with everybody. And while Mike is putting his upcoming event in the chat, is there anyone who has some questions for Mike? And I can and take yourself off mute and we can have you ask a question. I know some of you are going to be speaking really soon to rooms. If you want any advice from the speaking coach, he'd be this is the time to get it. So anyone have a question?
Looks like Haley has her hand up. She might be flying to her event right now in her private jet, looks like. So I don't.
Right.
Okay.
Hop on. We can go wherever you want, or anyone, just hop on and we'll fly to your destination. How about that? Yes, it's Halle. So it's pronounced like hallelujah. I love the fact that you said about stories. Share your stories before you jump in about yourself and all of that. Would that also be the same if you're, let's say you're selling a journal, or you're want to sell products or sell anything else? So is it like relating it to a story first and get their emotional part moving before anything else?
That's a good question. No matter what your product is, you want to make it available to the audience. The back of the room sales is better. Some people sell from the stage. I'm not a fan of it, but whatever it took, the whole point I'm going to take from my speaking mentor, Craig Valentine, and make your long road become their shortcut. So your story has got to, whatever it took to get that book written. Or let's just say you're selling candles. I was talking to somebody recently who has these homemade candles. They're supposed to be incredible. Whatever it took to get there, you want to show that audience. For me to learn these lessons, it took me 20 years of soul searching. I had to go bankrupt 6 times. I had to go through some terrible medical procedure. Whatever ordeal you had to get to that, describe it in a way to say every lesson you learn is going to be condensed into a 200 or 300 page book. And by the way, I'm autographing them at the end. If you want to purchase one, I'll be happy to autograph it and we can talk some more. That's a little back of the room sales. That's, and now you get me exciting. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Halle. All right, so that's a great question. Does anybody else have a question for Mike? We only have a couple. Well, we're really kind of running to the end. So I want to make sure if you have a question, you get a chance to ask it. Confidence. Does anybody have questions about how to build your confidence? Maybe if you're getting ready, if you're having some nerves come up, or the one for me, I would be asking about comedy. I always love it when people have something funny to say, but I never feel like I have anything funny to say. But that seems to warm up a room too. So I don't know. Does any?
Rich.
There's a hand up. Rich. Yes.
Mike, I just think that was a boom.
I
Sorry,
can't
boom
hear
down.
you. Can
How's
Yeah,
that?
there we go. All right.
Boom down. Sorry. First of all, that was a terrific presentation. I appreciate that. I'm at
Thank
the
you.
stage where I have my book, so I didn't do the talking about it beforehand because I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I was writing a book. So now I'm in the getting the marketing together for it. But what one of my biggest takeaways from this is that I'm on the right track. You were so reinforcing with what you're talking about, and I was like, oh yes, I'm doing that. Excellent, excellent. Amy, got to remember Amy. And so just thank you very much. I appreciate your time today.
My pleasure, Rich. I mean, it was something to do with your mom. I'm trying to some of the stories. I've heard you talk about it before, but I didn't get all the details. You want to give us a little teaser there, Rich?
I would love to give you a little teaser. So
How
my
about a
mom
plug?
had-
Plug your book. Come on, always plug
Awesome.
it.
Thank you. Didn't realize this was going to happen, but I appreciate it. So my mom had a Yiddish word or phrase for everything. Okay. So this was like part of my DNA growing up. And when she got Alzheimer's, the first thing she lost was the ability to speak. And it occurred to me at some point that if I didn't get these things out of my head, that they'd be lost forever. I thought I had a few. The book is 196 pages. I'm also a street photographer, as evidenced by my background, and I've taken each word, I've given it a 2-page spread, um, and I've given you the word, my understanding of the definition. I give you the phonetics, and then I've paired it with one of my photographs. So that's my book. It's Marge's Yiddish, as recalled by Chaim Shmerel, which he always used to refer to me. But Chaim Shmerel is like a pejorative term of endearment, kind of like snot nose or shithead or something like that. So yeah, that's what
Well,
we got.
that's incredible, Rich. I've heard you talk about it. I've seen a lot of your pictures. The story about your mom and her condition later on, that's the go home. Because if you open with that, then people are going to say, oh, your poor mother. Or they're going to think about somebody in their family going through an ordeal, and you miss the whole Yiddish Heimschmerls and all that. So if you talk about your passion for photography and how there's still a place for real photos and picture books, no matter how much technology advances, that's a perfect example of promote the genre. Promote the genre of book of, you know what, photo books are still in. And I've always, the fact that I can take my passion for photography, talk about what it's like to take pictures in Brooklyn. Talk about what it's like to just zoom in on is that a Buick? Zoom in on a Buick and make a story out of it. Not only did we have stories for these close-up pictures, my mom had these great words for them. And you can definitely share a couple of those words, as long as each of those, just take a few and make a story out of each of those words. And if you get 3 or 4 words that have a story that, whoa, and this book has over 100 of them? Well, maybe 50, because every other page is a picture.
Right. It's a
You got a lot of them,
There's
and
a
you
lot.
can work them into your vocabulary play, and then say, then take that emotional thing, my mom got Alzheimer's over time and she couldn't speak. And you know what? Communication was very different, but to condense everything into simple words made communication a whole lot better. So I want to make this available to you. It's also a window into how we communicated through all stages of my life, starting from when I was just a little kid, my mom called me Heimschmerl, to the point that we could barely speak to each other. We still had this bond, and I want to share that with you, and that'll be 1995. I'm sure you know.
Excellent. I'm
Yeah, a
trying
little
to
more,
play
little
with my
more.
thing. But so I want everybody to know, remember in the chat, Mike has an event coming up. So if you want more time with him, more of his knowledge to just kind of really sharpen anything that you might do in public speaking, he is the person to go to here, and he has a link to that event. You can also, of course, get in touch with him on LinkedIn. And I just want to thank everybody for coming today. I really appreciate this. I am going to do my best to take this video and either put a link to where you can watch it again, or see if I can stream it through, because it didn't go through on LinkedIn. I just always have problems with that. But to get the video up so that you can all see it. And I will be posting where you can either connect to that link, and then Mike's information to get in touch with him. So thank you all for coming. I want to respect your time. It's 12:30. I really appreciate everybody coming. We'll have more talks. Our next talk is with a book publisher. So if that whole process is mystifying to you, and you want someone to help explain and walk you through, there's so many different options. She's going to help us with that and how to find the publisher who's right for you. So thanks everyone for coming. I really appreciate everyone being here today, and have a wonderful, wonderful day and the rest of your weekend. Mike, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thanks,
Thanks,
pleasure.
Mike.
Thanks.
Good stuff,
Thank you
buddy.
so much.
Good time.
Great
Thanks.
stuff. Thank you.
Go promote those books now.
Absolutely.